Roman numeral 2. We must continue to be more committed to our mission than to our programming or our model. We must continue to be more committed to our mission than our programming or our model. Now, if you had come to me 10 years ago and said, Andy, 10 years from now, you're going to have to sit down with the North Point staff, the Buckhead staff, and the Brownsbridge staff and talk about ugly couches and have a talk about making change, I would say, are you kidding? I mean, our stuff is so new. Our stuff is so radically different than any other church in our community. I mean, the way we do groups is different. The way we do children's is different. I mean, compared to the church I came out of, which if you're a church planner, that's what we do all the time, right? Or if you're in a new church, compared to the church I came out of, my stuff is so fresh and so new and so revolutionary. I mean, they didn't change for 50 years. Surely I've got a good 20 years. They didn't change for 70 years. Surely I've got a good 20 years to take this model that I've created, to take these programs we've come up with. I mean, they're brand spanking new. Surely I got good 20 years to train people to do this model. And by the time this model kind of runs its course, I'll be so old it won't matter. But once we get it going, it's so new and fresh. We're not going to have these discussions. And I've discovered, as many of you have discovered, that that's exactly wrong. That the clock is ticking. And the church model that you've designed and that I've designed, that I've fallen in love with, that you've fallen in love with in your world, it doesn't have a 20-year run. It doesn't have a 50-year run. It doesn't have a 70-year run. Not if we want to create irresistible environments. Not if we want to create irresistible places for students to sit and children to sit and adults to sit. Not if we want people to drive onto our campuses, walk into our environments and go, good grief, this is amazing. I don't think I buy all the content, but I love what I felt here. I love what I experienced here, and my kids are begging me to come back. If that's your goal, you don't have 20 years. You don't have 50 years. And your stuff may be fresher and better than anybody else in the community, but as soon as you say go, as soon as you launch, the clock is ticking. That's why we have to be more committed to our mission than to our programming or our model. And you know what? For us, we created our model. I love our model. And my temptation and my tendency will be to do our model and to love our model more than our mission and more than our vision, because it's what I'm comfortable with. It's what we've hired people to. It's what I'm famous for. It's what we've done videos for. It's how we've trained all these other church pastors to the model. But the litmus test for my commitment to Jesus and the Great Commission will be when our model is no longer the most effective way to reach our community, will I abandon my model and will I abandon our programming for the sake of our mission? That's the challenge. We tell our campus pastors all the time, and with our strategic partners, I say, look, video is just a way to go further, faster, and to get going. But the day that video is no longer effective in your community, don't show another video. The goal isn't video. The goal isn't, for your living room kitchen. The goal isn't Wombaland and kid stuff, and the goal isn't Jumpstart, and the goal isn't Group Link. The goal is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And the day that your programming and the day that your model and the day that your structure doesn't support that, scratch it. Don't be so in love with it that you haul it around generation after generation after generation. We don't want to repeat that mistake. That's why you left where you were to get where you are. That's why you're looking to leave where you are to go somewhere else. That's why you're doing the most difficult job in the world next to being a single mom, and that is planting a church. It's hard work. And it's because you didn't want to carry with you generation-old problems. You wanted to create your own problems. And I'm telling you, you may be the most brilliant program person in the world, but as soon as you launched that amazing children's ministry, student ministry, camp, worship service, whatever it was, the clock started ticking. And maybe by God's grace, we will be the generation that realizes nothing has a 20 or a 50-year run. Everything has a life cycle. And we're going to be more in love with the mission than we are anything we've created, hired people to do, or are famous for. Letter A, over time, sustaining the model can become the mission. Over time, sustaining the model becomes the mission. Now, I sound critical. I'm not. I'm very sympathetic to this. But if you're a denominational leader, the hard thing about your job, and it's difficult. The hard thing about your job is, to some extent, you were hired to protect a model. You were hired to protect an approach to ministry. You were hired to train people in and involve people in a way to do things. That was your job, and I totally understand that. The challenge is, how can you be faithful to that, but at the same time be so forward-thinking to say, you know what, let's not continue to train people to do something that's really not that effective. And although those kinds of transitions and changes create all kinds of chaos, and yes, you will lose part of your donor base. It will go away. But if you're a denominational leader, or you're over a group of churches, or you have the opportunity to influence lots and lots of church leaders, this may be one of the most important things in the world for you to wrestle to the ground, because the clock has been ticking. And for some of us, and for some of you, the buzzer already went off. And you hit snooze, right? In fact, you've hit snooze so many times, you don't even hear the buzzer anymore. And you complain, well, people just aren't committed. People just aren't like what they used to be. And our culture is an unchurched culture. And blame. And then some, 25-year-old shows up in your town and hires a guitar player and goes to an elementary school, and there's thousands of people. And then you're looking at your list of excuses going, wow, I wonder where all those people came from. Here it is, ready? Our people, let me, a little insight for you. You don't even have any people. You don't. They're not our people. I can't say our people. I don't have any people. You don't have any people. There's just people. And there's just people who are hungry for spiritual things in every community. And as long as we hold on to outdated ways of approaching, and I'm not just talking about Sunday school versus groups. I'm not even talking about all those, just those high-level things. I'm talking about structure, church, the way the church is organized, the way churches make decisions, elders, congregation rule. All of that stuff needs to be thrown up every once in a while and say, what is the most effective way to ensure that we're accomplishing our mission? Because the clock starts ticking on all that stuff. Over time, letter B, the model can work against the mission. Again, all I have is my background to draw from, but my growing up in Baptist church with a great father, and grew up in a great Baptist church and a big Baptist church, and successful numerically. But the thing that would drive me crazy, because he inherited a model, and my dad's approach to a bad model was to ignore it. And we would have these conversations. I worked for him for 10 years. I'd say, Dad, that is so it. And he'd go, I know. Say, well, why don't you go down? Well, He said, so what he decided to do, he said, the church was just, you should hear him talk about local church. It's so funny. It's just funny. And in fact, the other day, he said, Dad, Andy, he said, I love being my age, which was encouraging, because I don't even like being my age. I want to go back a few years. He's like, I love being my age, 77. I love being my age. I said, why? He said, because I see things for how they really are now. And we started talking. There was nothing impresses him. He's been there, done that. Okay, so the room was full. Okay, we've filled up rooms before. He sees things for how they are, and his view of the local church is so wonderful now. But when I worked for him, his approach, instead of changing the systems, was he started In Touch. He said, I'm just going to preach to everybody in the world, because I can't change I don't want this system. Because back then there wasn't church planning. There weren't all the kinds of things we talk about these days. But he knew it was broken. And he didn't want to be, he wasn't satisfied with just working through a broken system, so he went out and he started his own system. And so many of your parents grew up, and grandparents have listened to my dad on television. That was his way to say, you know what, it is kind of icky and broken, but we're going to get the gospel out anyway. The mission is more important than the structure. But one of the things that used to drive me crazy about our church is on the mission and the mission statement, and all the conversation was all about evangelism. We did EE, and we'd train, and we had all talk about evangelism. We did an invitation after every sermon, right? Sunday night, Sunday morning, Wednesday night, you had to do an invitation, all about evangelism. But our structure and our programming was so anti-evangelism, you wouldn't dare bring a lost person there. You really wouldn't. I remember sitting next to a really talented musician in a Sunday night service, because I finally got him to come to church with me, and I kind of navigated him through the service. You ever done that? If you want to know what's really going on in your church, just invite a really lost person and then have them fill out an evaluation, You just see it through their eyes. And I just remember sitting next to Bill going, I know she's not like the best singer in the world, but see, she's the deacon, the chairman of the deacon. We have a deacon, you don't know what a deacon is. Okay, there's she's related to somebody, so she gets to sing, It's just... In fact, get this. Maybe this is a rule in your church. In our church, you couldn't sing a solo unless you remember the choir. Because the goal wasn't to have great music. The goal was to get people in the choir. The goal wasn't to passionately communicate a song that might grab somebody's soul. We don't want to do that. You can't, if you're a great soloist, unless you can come to choir practice and be in the choir, you can't sing a solo. Now, well, that all made sense if you're looking through one lens, but if you're thinking through the lens of evangelism, none of that. So much of what we did didn't make any sense. But the mission, the programming, and they were in conflict. Anyway, you've got your own stories.